All right. How's everybody doing tonight?
Excellent.
Thank you guys for coming to our event space here at 341 Jericho Turnpike. Beautiful August evening. My name is Eric Swenson with Todd Elliott Realty. Tonight we're going to address a bunch of great topics. First speaker of the evening is going to be Tom Casill. I always enjoy hearing Tom speak. I like to pick his brains on a number of different topics, and this man is a wealth of information with 30 years of experience at least in the business. So here he is, Tom Casill.
Thank you, Eric. I like hearing you speak too. Too bad, huh? I don't know everyone in the room. I'm sure you don't know me. My name's Tom Casill. I'm the president at MacGregor Abstract. Title insurance in New York. We're right here in Valley Stream. We do a lot of work in the New York City area. And I'm going to touch base on a couple of things tonight. There are some regulations they've been off. I'm going to address that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why that's important, why it seems like it might be good and it might be bad. And I'm going to take one illustration of a transaction. I'm going to brag on one of my employees. And I'm going to make it all sound like it's all one story, okay? A few years ago, New York State got interested in controlling the title insurance agents. There's literally, 1,300 title insurance agents in New York State. And up until about 4 or 5 years ago, there was no licensing, so there was very little control. And when there's no control, there's always some abuse. So they came in and they got us all licensed, and then they passed, I'm going to use this term, it's called Regulation 208. They decided that the whole industry was so bad that they were going to prohibit us from spending any money entertaining clients. Now, when I say any money, that means that I'm not allowed to buy you a cup of coffee. That means that we can't go to McDonald's and I can't buy you a Happy Meal because I would no longer be compliant and they could fine me, I'm not sure what the repercussions were, but it was very far-reaching, it was very drastic. If you remember a few years ago, all of a sudden there was a big threat that we weren't going to have title closes at closing because they decided that was a bad thing. The only thing I realized is that whoever's making these regulations doesn't understand title closings. They don't understand real estate transactions. All these things, well, dinner's not necessarily necessary, but title closes are. So they passed the regulations and the industry was burdened. The industry sued the state and they won. And the regulations were, I think the legal term was annulled, like they never existed. So the state decided to appeal, and the appeal went through, and the appellate court decided that some of the things were okay to have go forward and some of them were not, and they kicked it back to the lower court. And about 2 weeks ago, the same judge in the lower court annulled all the regulations again. Now, this affects me directly because it affects what I can do without being threatened by the state. But the big thing that this does is it prohibits companies from taking you out to the baseball game, taking you to the basketball game, and there are some companies that are very good at that. They spend a lot of money doing that. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that's bad. That's the way a lot of people conduct business. I've never been a big, is the right word, schmoozer? I've never done a lot of dinners. I've never done we used to have, we used to go to some baseball games, but very sparingly compared to what the industry did. What we've done instead is we've taken our money and we've invested it in our infrastructure, we've invested it in our people, and we have some amazing talent that we can afford because we're not spending money on dinners. Now, I'm talking to a room full of real estate investors, and let me tell you why that matters. Because if you're being taken out to dinner, I have a transaction that is exactly an illustration of this, and they don't have what it takes to perform, then you could have your hands on a really good transaction and you won't be able to close. And as a real estate investor, would you rather close your deal, or would you rather have a nice dinner or seats behind home plate? Now I know seats behind home plate could be a really attractive thing, but if you're an investor and that's how you make your living, we have a transaction. I was not the first title company that looked at this, but MacGregor has a reputation that if you have a deal and it's can't close, there's scores and scores of people know to send it over to me and we'll look at it. Not every deal is supposed to close, but this is one of those deals that the other title company choked on. This is a piece of commercial property in Brooklyn. It was in foreclosure, and in 2009, the referee deeds the property to the successful bidder at the auction. 2009. That's the deed. Okay? Now, in 2014, the same referee in the same action deeds the property to somebody else. Deed number 2. So the title company looks at this, who owns the property? The guy that got the second deed is the guy that's trying to sell the property. And when you look at recording statutes, the answer is first in time is first in right. Whoever gets the deed on first wins, and the other guy gets a lawsuit against somebody. But this is the same referee. We're looking through the foreclosure action, and there's nothing in the foreclosure action that leads us to any reason why the referee holds two separate auctions 5 years apart. 5 years apart. Was it a mistake? You don't keep an action going for 5 years by mistake. There was stuff going on. So the first company looks at this and they don't know what to do with it. And if I have a room full of professionals here, you're probably choking on the idea here too. What is the answer? I got this gentleman. His name is George. George is a very unusual man. If you speak to him on the phone, you might not appreciate it because he's old, he's curmudgeonly, he's not a people person, he's a paper person, okay? But when he saw this, George has been doing title insurance. He took a break from title insurance to go and participate in the Vietnam War. That's how far back. And then he came back, and his entire career, he's with me more than 25 years at this point. He looked at this, he said, Tom, I've got to know what happened. Let me take a whack at it. And sure enough, he went and he looked at the foreclosed owner. What do you do if you're in foreclosure and you don't want to go through? That's right, file a bankruptcy. The bankruptcy puts a stay on the action and they can't proceed forward at all. The owner that was foreclosed filed 4 different bankruptcies over the course of this whole time. Not just in between the deeds, but from when the action started to the end. We got all the documents from all 4 bankruptcies. Literally more than 2 reams of paper of court proceedings. Some of the most boring stuff I'd ever read in my life. If I ever have trouble going to sleep, this is what I read. It's like action, a request for judicial intervention. What is that? Lawyers know that stuff. And you know what he found in the action? Somewhere about 3/4 the way down through that, he found a bankruptcy court order vacating that first deed because it was given in violation of a bankruptcy stay. They were in bankruptcy when that first sale happened. They weren't supposed to go forward. They went forward anyway. And that's why they had to go back and do all this stuff in the action again. But most title companies don't have a George. Most title companies are more interested in going out into the baseball game or to the U.S. Open. And once again, they do more business than me. These people don't come to me first. They come to me when they have a problem. But if you're a real estate investor, you don't know you have a problem until you're in the middle of something like this. You go back and look for stuff like this. I've never seen this before in my life. You need to choose who you're doing business with. Regulation 208, it might be burdensome, but it didn't affect us all that much. We already had the people in place. We were already investing in our infrastructure. And we're going to continue doing business like that. We might go to a baseball game, we might have a dinner or something like that. We're not antisocial, but we put the important things first. Now, that's what I wanted you to know about me. That's what I wanted you to know about MacGregor and my staff and why it's important to choose your title company. Having said that, one of the things that we do is we educate. We do a lot of educational events. We do a lot of CLEs, continuing legal education. And I was at an event just yesterday, and one of my attorney friends came up to me frustrated with these rent regulations. We had somebody here last week, it was a month ago, talking about the rent regulations, and there were an awful lot of questions and not an awful lot of answers. And my attorney friend came up to me and said, Tom, you know what we really need? We really need to be educated on these rent regulations. And I said, you're right, we're going to do this. And by the end of the day yesterday, one of my other buddies, is an expert at landlord-tenant. And when I talked to him about his willingness to speak on the topic, he said, Tom, I don't feel like an expert because there's so many questions that can't be answered yet. And I said, John, that's okay. If that's what it is, then that's what it is. He goes, Tom, you know what? I am the expert because not only have I read these, I don't know how many times, but he's already been to 6 or 7 seminars on it. There's things that have to be decided by the courts. We are going to have events in the next few months very specifically on these rent regulations. Now, having said that, a little birdie said something to me earlier today who knows what he's talking about. And evidently, I believe it's the New York State Bar Association is forming a legal action against the state for these regulations because they are unconstitutional. They're calling it an unconstitutional taking of property rights without compensation. So maybe by the time we get there, the seminar will sound different than it would today. But if any of you want to come, just shoot me an email. I'll get you on the list. Don't have times, don't have dates. We're still putting the thing together. We usually do these in October and November. But I'm announcing it. You're the first ones that are hearing it. So that's all I got to say for tonight. Let me bring this, who's our master of ceremonies?
Let's get to Todd. Thanks, Todd.